Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Cruising your way next, Off 90. We learn about the Schuler brothers and their journey to the United States. We meet Dudley Edmondson, an author with a passion for getting young people outdoors. And a recipe from Chef Shari Mukherjee. It's all coming up on your next stop, Off 90. Hi, I'm Barbara Keith. Thanks for joining me on this trip, Off 90. Karl Schuler was born in Romania during World War II. His father was drafted into the Romanian army, and as the Russian army entered Romania, Karl and his mother fled to Hungary. Later, they were reunited with Karl's father, Gustav, and lived several years in a former army barracks that had tarp roofs and rats. Once, when asked what he wanted for his birthday, Karl said, "Get me to America. The rest is up to me."
Karl Schuler was born in Romania in the early part of World War II. In 1944, his father was drafted into the Romanian army, leaving just he and his mother to fend for themselves. Soon, Karl and his mother would be forced to leave their home in Romania.
September of 1944, the Russians started moving into Romania where we were living, and my mother had to make a decision as to leave or stay behind, and she decided that we're going to leave. The only thing we could do at that point was just take with us what we could carry.
They fled to Hungary, but when the Russians advanced into that country, Karl's family was forced to move again, this time to Austria.
You know, there was war going on around us, and I was very scary and trying to get food and shelters.
Throughout World War II and even after, food was scarce. To get food, most people had to barter for it, and cigarettes were a valuable bartering currency. Youngster Karl would sometimes get cigarettes from American soldiers.
American GIs came by, they throw us the cigarettes or flip part of it, and what we do, we pick up the stubs of the cigarettes and take them home and dry them out again, and Mom would restuff them into new cigarettes and use the cigarettes as barter for food.
In Austria, Karl's youngest brother, Peter, was born. The family stayed in a small brick house on a farm next to some railroad tracks.
When the house I lived in was close to some railroad sidings, and there was a train of oil, basically train cars, and this was the Easter time, and here came a swarm of American airplanes right over the house, and one came so low, the wheels clipped part of the roof, and they shot that whole train on fire. But the scary part was there, especially was when they were shooting both directions on the train, the full front part of the house was totally shot full of bullets. So that was kind of scary.
Later, Karl and his brothers and mother would be reunited with the boy's father, Gustav, and they would move into an army barracks that had thin walls, tarp roofs, no indoor plumbing, and rats. They lived there for several years. Once, during their time there, and prior to Karl's birthday, his parents asked him what he wanted. He said, "Get me to America. The rest is up to me."
When you live in that kind of situation, you have nothing to lose. So whatever from that point on forward, whatever it is, you're bound to move up. And especially once you got here, you saw how everybody lived and on and on. So really, to me, it was really up to you if you wanted to get ahead or not. And all you have to do is work for it.
6 years after applying, the Schulers' application was approved. Once in the U.S., Karl and his brother Peter learned English, went to college where Peter studied business administration and economics, and Karl studied business, architecture, and marketing. Several years after college, they got together and founded a construction company in Rochester called AB Systems. They went from living in a tarp shack to growing a tremendously successful business in America that employs more than 30 people. They've worked for and lived the American dream.
Rochester chef Shari Mukherjee shows us how to make a beautiful tomato and burrata salad.
Hi, I'm Shari Mukherjee, and today I am here to show you guys how to make this really delicious end of summer, early fall tomato salad. Here I have a bowl full of roughly chopped. They're not very pretty at all, and that's fine. I want it to look nice and rustic. So you can see they're about a ½ inch diameter, or ½ inch pieces, chopped up into here. On top of this, we are gonna go ahead and add some burrata. Burrata is a really delicious cheese. It's basically a mozzarella that's been kind of blown into a ball and then stuffed with like cream and really, really delicious more cheese. So we're gonna go ahead and just add this right onto the top of our salad here, and we'll kind of flip it. I have our oven set to broil. Now here I just have a couple pieces of just sourdough bread. I'm gonna add some butter to this, a little bit on both sides and onto a sheet pan. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get this into the broil. We want to watch it. It's gonna take, maybe 3 to 5 minutes in the broiler. I like to flip it halfway just to make sure both sides are golden. We're looking to get that bread nice and golden and crispy. All right, so into the oven, we're gonna put this. Again, it's set to the broil, and we're gonna put a timer on. We don't wanna forget about it. So I'm gonna set a timer for 3 minutes, and then we'll check back. To finish our salad, you see we have our burrata, our tomatoes. We need a little bit of green on that plate. So we're gonna go ahead and use some basil. We are going to julienne this basil. So we're gonna stack them up really nicely, and then go ahead and roll it tight like a cigar. Take your knife and just simply chop. Now into our salad, we're simply going to take some olive oil. This is just an extra virgin olive oil. And be generous. This is really the only flavoring of your salad, so be generous. We're just gonna pour some in over the cheese a little bit. We're gonna add some pepper. And I always like to add my salt last, because the moment you add salt to tomatoes, all their moisture is just gonna seep out. So I like to do that a little bit last. And the cheese is also pretty salty, so you're not gonna have to worry too much about there not being enough salt on our tomatoes. All right, now our toast is out of the oven. You can see it's beautiful golden, a little bit more golden on one side. You choose what side you want. We're gonna go with the less golden on top. If you wanted, you could rub this with a little bit of garlic. I'm not gonna do that today. We're just gonna go really simple. So here again, we have our tomato salad. I'm now gonna add just a little bit of salt just around the edges. We are gonna top it with a little bit of salt too, so you'll see how that goes. Now with the burrata, like I said, it's like a mozzarella ball that's filled with cream and other cheese, and you go ahead and you take your knife and you slice into it. When you slice into it, you'll see it almost looks like cottage cheese in there. It kind of oozes out. Now how I like to eat this, and the outside you can eat as well, so that outside is mozzarella, so go ahead and eat the whole thing. Don't throw that away, it's not just a casing. How I like to eat this though, is you take your nice toasted piece of bread, put it on a plate here. All right, our nice toasted piece of bread. I like to take a little bit of that burrata and just spread it onto the bread. And then we're gonna go ahead and really reach in, grab those tomatoes with that basil, pile it on top. If you want, you can top it with some extra basil if you've chopped a little bit more. We're gonna just top it with just a little bit of extra salt. And this is it. This is delicious. This is amazing. Really, really tasty. That cheese with the tomatoes and the basil, I'm telling you, there is not a better match anywhere. It's so, so good. I wish tomatoes were in season all year round, honestly. Enjoy.
Dudley Edmondson is an author, public speaker, and filmmaker whose passion is nature and getting people of color outdoors. He's an avid outdoorsman that loves to inspire young people.
My name is Dudley Edmondson. I live in Duluth, Minnesota. I'm a freelance photographer, filmmaker, and author. Yeah, I've been an outdoor person pretty much my entire life, even as a kid. Actually, it really started when I was a kid. My parents used to take us on picnics. I'd wander off into the woods near the picnic area and just explore and hang out and stuff. And that, for me, was very therapeutic, getting away from the city and stuff. So I really enjoyed being outdoors. And so just nature in general has always been something that's been a huge part of my life. Yeah, bird watching really started in junior high school, but it wasn't until I got into high school and my art teacher was a big time bird watcher, and he formed a bird watching club with some of the students. And I was one of maybe 4 nerdy kids who joined. Raised enough money to go on a birding trip to Texas from Ohio. And seeing all the birds in Texas and his ability to identify those birds with at just a glance. He would just look at a bird and say crested caracara or plain chachalaca or something like that. And it's like, wow, how did he do that? And that really got my interest. After I graduated from high school, I just really stuck with birds and then later became a bird photographer. For a long time, I specialized in birds of prey. So that's also part of the reason why I live where I live in Duluth, Minnesota. And it's nice now to just be able to really sit in my backyard and just look up and see hawks flying. I'm always birding. I'm either birding visually, I'm looking at birds, or I'm birding by ear. If I'm out of doors, I'm bird watching. You know, I came to Minnesota the early 90s, and I just wanted to be among wild things and in wilderness. And there was really nothing like that in Columbus, Ohio. I wanted to move to Minnesota because I love wilderness and it's super accessible, particularly on the North Shore. There's just plenty of places to access the out of doors and wilderness. It was a combination of taking pictures and then the process of developing them that really got me first interested in photography, but I stuck with it because it was a way to keep track of the birds I was seeing, and also I got into photographing wildflowers. You know, the ability to photograph nature and show people the beauty of nature, at least the way I see it. And so that's really what got me doing photography and got me interested in sticking with it. Didn't really consider myself to be a professional until I moved to Minnesota, and that was in 1990, 89, 90. And I felt like that this is the beginning of my professional career because I specifically moved to Minnesota for the sole purpose of being a professional photographer. Originally, I thought that I wanted to be either a wildlife biologist or a game warden. Of course, I wanted to be connected to nature, but then I started thinking that eventually I would end up stuck at a desk. At some point in my career, I would be stuck at a desk, and that horrified me. So I just decided that I wanted to be a nature photographer, also because of the creative aspect of it. The creative control of photography and then still being connected to nature for me was a good combination. And so, and besides, I suck at math. So I just felt like being a biologist or a game warden, at some point, the math would come back to haunt me. So for me, water, it's one of those things that everybody is attracted to, and we don't even know why. You know, water is constantly moving for the most part, which makes it a fascinating subject to photograph. You know, my photography really is my way of showing people how I see the world around me. You can't see the way I see what I see. But if I capture that with a photograph, then you can see what I see. Because two people could be looking at the same thing and not necessarily see the same thing or see it in the same way. And a camera and my photography, I feel like, gives me the ability to do that, to show people how I see the world which I would imagine is very different from the way other people see the world. When I go out to take a photo, I don't often know exactly what I'm looking for, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to capture. Nature moves very, very, very slow. And when you're in the out of doors, you have to adjust yourself to that and slow yourself down to nature's time. If you're lucky, you will come home with one, maybe two images you like. I've been an outdoor person, as I said, all my life, you know, as a young high school grad. And, you know, I started traveling around the country solo, camping and hiking and bird watching and things like that. You know, I just found that there weren't a lot of people of color, particularly African Americans, in the outdoors, at least in the places that I was going. And so after I became a professional nature photographer, and started traveling even more, going to national parks and other public lands around the country. Again, I just found that there weren't a lot of people of color, at least Americans. I mean, there was some diversity in these spaces, but there were oftentimes people from other countries that were visiting our national parks and our public lands. And so that got me interested in trying to figure out how I could get more people of color into the out of doors. My philosophy has always been, I belong wherever I choose to be. Because I'm passionate about access to public land, I refuse to allow anybody to deny me that privilege. And so I oftentimes try to encourage people of color and other African Americans to feel that same determination and passion for accessing public land. I take people out, I show them spaces that I visit, and show them that, you know, these spaces can be safe, but mostly to me, they belong to you, and if you have to take ownership of them. I always encourage people that when you go into the out of doors to remember to slow down and move at nature's pace.
Rochester band Fires of Denmark is the brainchild and musical project of Mike Terrill, who writes, performs, and records all his work. We're so happy to share their music video with you. Enjoy.
remarkable keyboard plays the same tones and sends signals along the nerves to the brain where we perceive it as sound. Of course, the outer ear operates in air, but the cochlea is filled with a liquid. And transferring sound waves from air to a liquid is one of the most difficult problems known to science. But in the ear, this problem is beautifully solved by the precise design of the middle ear with its two diaphragms of just the right size, and three connecting bones that provide the exact leverage required.
We've reached the end of this tour off 90. Thanks for riding along. See you next time. But before we go, we meet Carl Schuller's brother Peter. After World War II, his family lived in a refugee camp in Austria, in a tar paper army shack without running water and without heat except for the cooking stove. The family moved to the US when Peter was 10. After college, Peter and his brother Carl started a construction company that has built more than 2,000 buildings over 50 years.
1946. World War II recently ended when Peter Schuler was born in Austria. For the next 10 years, he, his parents, and 2 brothers would live in a refugee camp in Austria. World War II was over, but the hardship continued for millions of people impacted by the war, including Peter's family. Times were tough. Food was scarce.
So we ended up in a refugee camp in Burrata, Austria. So we lived in that camp from 46 until 56. It was a tar paper army shack, barbed wire fence on the outside, no indoor plumbing, outdoor toilets, obviously. The place was rat infested. I remember, having to go to the bathroom at night and going out there and being scared about rats. No indoor heating other than a stove that we used for heating as well as cooking. So that's where we lived then for 10 years. We did develop some friendships, with of other people that lived in that camp with us. We had a river nearby, we had a forest and all that. So you could get out of this camp, you could go out there and play. We picked berries out there and all of that. So that was not that bad of a place to live. We didn't have to live in a tent. We didn't have much food, but we did have a little food. My father was working for a factory at that time, making about 25 cents an hour.
While living in the barracks, Peter's parents applied for citizenship in the United States. They had family there, and to them, it looked like heaven on earth. When Peter was 9, he had an opportunity to leave the tarp roof Army barracks.
The Red Cross, they had a program in Austria. They would take these children out of the refugee camps, and they would make provisions for these children to live in another country. And I was one of those lucky kids. I ended up then living with a family in Denmark. So I was in first grade, and I ended up with a family by the name of Carl and Dagmar Jacobsen, good Danish people.
Overnight, he went from living in a tarp shack to a house with controlled climate, indoor plumbing, warm showers, and plenty of food.
It was a brick house. I had my own bedroom. They provided clothing for me. We had food every day. And I looked back at that time and I said, you know what? This is the way I'd like to live someday.
Peter returned to live with his family in the Army barracks. Fortunately, his parents' application for U.S. citizenship 6 years earlier was now approved. The family moved to the U.S. when Peter was 10.
When you move from another country, you can say, poor me, or you can say, you know what? I'm going to work just a little harder. I'm going to put in a little more effort academically, sports-wise, and all of that. I was that kind of a kid when I was growing up. I just worked a little harder academically, sport-wise, and all that, and had some relatively good success.
Peter began learning English at age 10 and worked full-time through high school and college. Several years after earning his business degree, he founded a Rochester-based construction company with his brother Carl called AB Systems. The company has worked a little harder and has been extremely successful. Peter, his brother Carl, and AB Systems have built more than 2,000 buildings over the last nearly 50 years.
Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.